Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
As parents, we need to become a little bit more comfortable with our children being uncomfortable. Not that we're supposed to be making them suffer. When it's time for the child to get off the dummy, if you've made the decision, then stick with it.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
We are back from holidays. Not that we went anywhere thanks to lockdowns and all that sort of stuff.
That really put a damper on things, didn't it?
And it rained. That put another damper on things. Winter holidays. I hope they're better next year than they were this year. We'll talk more about our I'll Do Better tomorrow on Friday with the holidays. Hi, my name's Justin, here with Kylie. We're the parents of 6 kids. I've written a bunch of books about happy families and run the website happyfamilies.com.au. Hey, Kylie, yesterday, that was a fun podcast. Did you enjoy what we did yesterday?
When I told the kids that we were actually going to be interviewed by Cameron and Ali Dado, they had no idea who they were until I reminded them that we'd actually seen Cameron at the Capitol Theatre a few years ago. He was playing Captain Von Trapp.
In I was going to say Mary Poppins, but it's the Sound of Music. I remember, yeah. Waltzing around the stage.
It was so funny because our 10-year-old, her whole face lit up and she said, "Oh, he was really cute." That was the first thing she said.
Like he's in his 50s. What are you saying? Gosh.
Well, that's when the 14-year-old kind of looked at us and went, "That is gross." Yeah. He must be at least 50, Mum.
He's got grey hair and a beard, and the 10-year-old saying,
"Oh, look, he looks very distinguished, but I'm surprised my 10-year-old finds him."
Maybe she was looking for another word, and cute was the only one that came out. I know that when he was a kid, when he was a TV star, when we were kids growing up, because he's kind of got a half a dozen or so, maybe 10 years on you, and a few less on me. But he was this icon. I mean, everyone knew who Cameron Dado was, and he married Alison Brie. Like, she was going to be this supermodel, and she gave it all up so that she could be married and be a mum, which I think is nowadays
it goes against the grain.
Yeah, even more so now. But even then, in the 1980s, it was a really, really big deal. So if you missed the conversation that we had with Cameron and Ali Dado, it was on
in their bathroom.
We replayed a podcast that they have on, well, it was an episode of their podcast called Separate Bathrooms, and you can catch it on their podcast called Separate Bathrooms, or you can just listen to it in our feed from yesterday. I really liked the conversation. That's because I got to talk about how good you are. So let's find out how good you are as a mum. It's been a while, but listener questions every Tuesday. We try to use our experience, your experience as a mum and my experience as a parenting expert, to answer your questions and help your family be happier. This one deals with something that we have never in our entire lives had to deal with at a practical level. You want to read the question? It comes from Jess.
Jess said, on the weekend, my just-turned 3-year-old gave her dummies to the dummy fairy. She was very, very attached to them, but had a habit of chewing on them. She broke the last one we had, so it was time. She spent the first couple of nights just heartbreakingly sobbing in her bed. It must have been so hard for her, such a huge sleep association, but she was so brave. But we are now night 6 and she is going to sleep well past 7:30. Her bedtime is usually 6:30. It's like she doesn't know what to do with herself once she's in bed. Constantly up with a story about what she needs or doesn't need. My question, what can I do to help her when she goes to sleep?
Ditch the dummy. Golly. So I think this is kind of interesting because none of our kids have ever had a dummy. We made a decision early on that we weren't going to do it. I know that some people would. There's no shame if you've given your kids a dummy. We just decided for ourselves that we weren't going to do it. We didn't actually want to have to go through this.
Yeah, that was definitely part of the reason. And I remember with each of them, there came a point where things were so tough with sleep patterns and everything that I even did try with various children to help the situation move along better.
Well, actually, with Abby, our second one, she didn't sleep in the early days.
Well, no, after she was born, she literally screamed for almost 24 hours. She just would not stop. The only time I could actually keep her calm was if she was lying on top of me. But in the hospital, that's a no-go. So they would take her off me and put her back in the cot on her back and she would scream. And so when they left, I'd put her on my tummy, tummy to tummy, and she would calm down. And then they'd walk
5 minutes of sleep.
Yes, it was painful. And it wasn't until my midwife came in that night and she saw me and I just looked at her and I said, I can't keep doing this. Like, I am done. And she looked at me. She put her finger to her lips. She grabbed a dummy. She shoved that dummy in Abby's mouth. She wrapped her tight and she placed her on her tummy in the crib.
On her stomach.
Yes.
I mean, gosh. What a great midwife.
And she wheeled her off. I didn't see her for 6 hours.
So do you know if she cried with the dummy?
She didn't. But she didn't have it in her mouth either. Like she literally...
Yeah, the dummy didn't make any difference. She just hadn't been awake for 24 hours and needed some sleep.
And that was the only time she took it.
Well, we think, maybe. But we have kind of been through it with bottles, with baby bottles, because once you stop breastfeeding and the kids were on bottles, we still had to get them off that nipple. They
become very attached, don't they?
Boy, oh boy. So let's talk about this. Before we answer Jess's question about her 3-year-old, I think we should just address how to get kids off the dummy. Or if you're listening in the United States and some other parts of the world, the pacifier. Sorry, we call them dummies in Australia. Stick the dummy in the mouth is how we say it. How do we get our kids off a dummy? And then what do we do with a 3-year-old who is going to bed late because she's missing her dummy? We'll answer those questions right after this.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Are screens creating tension at home? Tweens, Teens and Screens is a webinar to guide families to healthy, safe super screen solutions. Buy today at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And today we are answering Jess's question.
How do we ditch the dummy?
How do we ditch the dummy? Well, no, it's not really how do we ditch. She's done a fabulous job of ditching the dummy. It's actually now what do I do? Because her child is going to bed a lot later than she would like.
And probably really tired. So let's talk about dealing with the 3-year-old shortly. Let's just go through the basic steps because there is no doubt at all. The earlier we can help our kids to get off the dummy, the easier it is to get rid of it. Like 12 months, 18 months, 6 months, somewhere in there, it's going to be much easier than 2 or 2.5 or 3 or 4. And I have been told, I actually don't know if there's any science behind it, so I want to be careful what I say here, but I have been told that kids having a dummy or a bottle in their mouth when they're too old, it can be bad for their teeth. It pushes against their top teeth apparently and changes the structure of the face and does all weird stuff like that. So earlier is definitely better. Number one tip, other than don't give them one in the first place, which we've already kind of covered off, is that once it's time, just get them in the habit of only having it for certain times or certain places.
Well, I think that's the biggest struggle that we all have, whether it be the bottle or the dummy or a blankie or whatever it is. It actually becomes a parent's crutch as well
because it's convenience.
It's so convenient. We know it's going to work, and so we give it to them. But what it actually does is creates this position where finally we've got to get rid of it, or it gets lost, or it gets broken, and all of a sudden we've got nothing to replace it with.
And what ends up happening as well is we sort of say to the kids, well, you can only have it in the car or you can only have it for sleep time, but then they're having a meltdown, having a tantrum, and they're like, I want the dummy. And we kind of go, oh, for goodness sakes, it's not worth it. We talk about this quite a lot. As parents, we need to become a little bit more comfortable with our children being uncomfortable. Not that we're supposed to be making them suffer, but when it's time for the child to get off the dummy, if you've made the decision, then stick with it. And it may mean that it's going to be hard for a week or two, but they do grow through it. They do get over it. So I would say only certain times or certain places. And the other thing that I would say is use it less and less. Like, don't use it every time they say that they need it. Maybe use it every second time and then stretch it out to every third time and then stretch it out to every fourth time rather than just going straight up cold turkey.
As I was listening to you, I couldn't help but think about one of your Justinisms, fast is slow and slow is fast, and that concept that the more we offer it, the slower the results are going to be at the other end. We're using the fast fix from the very beginning. The dummy's a fast fix, right?
Yes.
And from the very beginning, we think that's our answer, but we're actually slowing the process down so much longer.
Well, we're creating a process that didn't need to happen in the first place if we can avoid it. But again, once it's happened there's a couple of other ideas that are useful. I've heard a lot of parents, and we actually did this with a couple of our kids. We cut bigger holes in the nipple of the bottle.
Well, I don't think we actually did. I think they chewed.
They chewed them. Now, I distinctly remember getting the scissors out or the knife and sort of cutting the top off one of them. And then they just got angry and had a big screaming fit. And I thought, oh, what have I done? Worst dad ever. But eventually they were like, yeah, I think I'm just going to drink out of a cup from now on.
I honestly, those tiny little holes, I don't know how they could just, I don't know how they don't get sick of them.
Yeah. The other thing that I would say is that once the kids are upset because you've taken it off them, whether it's a bottle or a blankie or a dummy or whatever it might be, lots of cuddles, lots of songs, lots of distraction. Like just get that evening routine. You're essentially taking what has been a critically important component of the evening routine, the bedtime routine, out of the routine, which means the whole routine is up in the air. And so now it's time to establish a new routine. So you establish that new routine with a little bit of massage or a song or a story time, whatever it might be that you're going to do now, and say, this is how we go to bed now that you're a big girl because you're 3, or now that you're a big boy because you're 2, whatever it might be. That's going to really make a difference. One thing that's kind of interesting, a lot of people like to put their kids to bed with either a podcast or with some soft music. I came across some research just the other day that was quite intriguing that suggested that may not always be good either for adults or for children, and that going to bed with something as close to quiet as possible is usually actually going to be better for them. I can't remember all the details of it, but Cuddles, songs, routine, they will get used to it. But I'll tell you what, once you start, no going back.
That's going to mean there's going to be a couple of nights, maybe even a couple of weeks of really huge discomfort for both mum and dad, the whole family, I'd say.
Which kind of brings us full circle back to Jess, right? Like,
yeah.
It's been a week, late bedtimes, it's not working out.
So I'm really interested to know what you would tell Jess or anyone else who's going through this when we've gone through this difficulty, whether it be replacing a dummy or, losing a loved one, or there's so many different things that impact our children's lives. How do we navigate the new norm? Because the new norm for them is an hour past bedtime.
Yeah. It's a break in routine, regardless of what it is that's doing it, whether it's removing a dummy or something else. Once the routine gets changed, something has happened here. There's been a developmental shift. And I think that, number one, I would say don't worry so much about what time the baby's going to bed. To me, the time of the baby going to bed is far less important than the hours.
How?
Yeah, the hours of sleep, the quality of sleep, and what the process is. So if bedtime's now 7:30, just make it a kind, gentle, patient, loving process. You might still start at 6:15, and it might just take a little bit longer. Your child will grow through this, and it might take a few weeks, but they'll grow through it.
I distinctly remember that around that 2.5 to 3.5 year gap there was when our children's sleep patterns changed significantly, and sometimes it meant even not having sleeps during the day. Like there was a significant shift.
I hated that. I hated when they give up their daytime sleep. It's like, no.
And so an hour past bedtime feels like a really big deal. But if she's going to sleep happy and there's a beautiful routine in place, then I wouldn't be sweating that.
We hope that really helps, Jess. Thanks so much for sending the email through. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask us, we're happy to help. Podcasts, that's podcasts with an S, at happyfamilies.com.au. Podcasts at happyfamilies.com.au. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media, and Craig Bruce is our executive producer. We love helping make your family happier. You can check out everything about our Happy Families memberships or get the free stuff at happyfamilies.com.au.